You're listening to Truth Decay, and this is your host, One Concerned American. For those of you that are familiar with this show, YouTube monetized my channel a few weeks ago, and then not even 2 days later, they deleted it, and it appears to have been terminated. In fact, the day that the media began announcing that Joe Biden was the president-elect, I saw in my email that YouTube terminated my account at around 3 a.m. that morning. And so now I'm honestly just kind of pissed. And I don't care about money anymore. I just want to give out this information. I just want to wake people up. I want to show them what's going on. And that's the point of me starting this new channel. So I really appreciate all my former subscribers and all my new listeners and everybody that's going to listen to this. Over time, I'll be making some more videos and going more in depth on this stuff. But on this episode, I want to talk about the election. I didn't vote in the 2020 election because at this point, I've just seen too much evidence that the government is actively dividing us and harming people and doing lots of things that aren't in all of our best interests. So I decided not to vote. And in this episode, we're going to go over some particular things that I've noticed about Joe Biden and Donald Trump. And before we get into this, I want to talk about Franklin Delano Roosevelt for 1 second. A lot of you guys are familiar that he was a 32nd degree Freemason of the Scottish Rite. He gave the United States our first run of socialism with the New Deal. He also started the FBI. And this man said that in politics, nothing happens by accident. If it happens, you can bet it was planned that way. And to be honest, folks, your reality is really something more like the Illuminati card game. A lot of people are familiar with how this game came out around the late 80s and early 90s, and it seems to have predicted a lot of major events. And the whole point of the game is that there are opposing conspiracies that use various legal, illegal, mystical means to kind of gain control and gain power over each other. And you can see that it's had imagery predicting 9/11. You can see the attacks on the Twin Towers and the Pentagon. You can see this figure who appears to be Donald Trump and a card that says enough is enough with the caption that at any time, at any place, our snipers can drop you. And this is interesting because we all know that The Simpsons also predicted that not only would Donald Trump become the president, but that something would happen to him and he would die. Additionally, you can see that the Center for Disease Control also has a card in this game. And it talks about how this agency can be weaponized against the people. But I've always thought the most interesting card was this one, Law and Order. You know, I remember Trump talking about this a lot in the 2016 campaign, and I know a lot of people were wanting law and order when these riots started happening over the last few months. And if you look at the card, you notice that it talks about increasing your popularity with conservative groups. So what I'm going to do in this video is break down for you how Joe Biden and Donald Trump both handle the topics of law and order. And then I want you to come to the conclusion at the end for yourself of who is really the tougher person when it comes to law and order. And what does this mean for our country? I believe we're being lied to on many levels, so I do not participate in the elections at this point. So I want to start off by playing a couple clips of Donald Trump talking about law and order over the last few years.
We have to bring back law and order. Now, whether or not in a place like Chicago you do stop and frisk, which worked very well, Mayor Giuliani is here, it worked very well in New York, it brought the crime rate way down. But you take the gun away from criminals that shouldn't be having it. We have gangs roaming the street, and in many cases, they're illegally here, illegal immigrants, and they have guns, and they shoot people. And we have to be very strong, and we have to be very vigilant. We have to know what we're doing for them. I am dispatching thousands and thousands of heavily armed soldiers, military personnel, and law enforcement officers to stop the rioting, looting, vandalism, assaults, and the wanton destruction. Seattle. They heard we were coming in the following day, and they put up their hands, and we got back Seattle. Minneapolis, we got it back, Joe, because we believe in law and order, but you don't. The top 10 cities and just about the top 40 cities are run by Democrats and in many cases radical left, and they've got you wrapped around their finger, Joe, to a point where you don't want to say anything about law and order. And I'll tell you what, the people of this country want and demand law and order, and you're afraid to even say it.
So there you go. You can see that Donald Trump strongly ties gun violence to things like illegal immigration. You can see that he loves things like stop and frisk. If you watch the second clip where you saw the protesters being rushed by the police in Washington, D.C., if you actually study what happened that day, Donald Trump had the streets cleared out, and then he walked down to a church not far and took a photo opportunity with a few of his cronies, and then he walked away. So he actually busted up that whole riot there, the whole protest, whatever you want to call it. I wasn't there. I don't really know if it was peaceful or not. But the whole thing was broken up, and then he went and took a picture with the Bible in his hand and then walked away. And then finally, you see when he's talking to Joe Biden, he's telling him, oh, you won't even say law and order. But think about it, folks. Donald Trump actually promised that Hillary Clinton would be put in jail. And I'm going to show you how Joe Biden is actually responsible for thousands and thousands of people of color being behind bars right now. So before I get into Biden, though, let's talk about Donald Trump. We all know that he goes way back being in support of the death penalty. When the Central Park 5 thing was happening, he took a full-page ad out in the New York Times condoning bringing back the death penalty. And even after these guys were supposedly proven innocent by DNA, he still maintains his beliefs from before. Trump has also gone on the record and said that he wants criminals who murder police officers to get the death penalty. Regardless of how you feel about that personally, I don't really have a viewpoint on that one way or the other. But there has been a Supreme Court decision on this. It was called Woodson versus North Carolina. And in this case, the U.S. Supreme Court actually overturned that a state had to have a mandatory death sentence. Different states are allowed to handle it different ways. And for Trump to just say, well, I think if this happens, you should be able to get the death penalty. I mean, guys, either we have a constitution or we don't, you know. The guy also infringed on the Second Amendment various times, too. He's also gone on the record and said that he believes waterboarding and torture work. So break all this down. I mean, Trump thinks that you can be stopped and frisked. He thinks that you can be tortured. He thinks that if you might have to defend yourself from the police, that you should get a mandatory death sentence. I mean, these are some serious violations of the Constitution, in my opinion. I do support the death penalty in some cases. Not 100% of the time, but if you look at the map, there's about a third of U.S. states at least that don't even have the death penalty at this point. And there are also cases where the death penalty is actually more expensive than giving someone life in prison. If you look at these statistics here, in California, the death penalty has cost more than $4 billion since 1978. That includes the cost of trials, appeals, and incarceration on death row. In 2019, the California governor issued a moratorium on the death penalty. In Florida, enforcing the death penalty costs $51 million a year more than it would to give all first-degree murderers life in prison without parole. In North Carolina, a death penalty case costs $2.16 million per execution more than sentencing murderers to life imprisonment. So across the United States, you know, the data shows that the death penalty is actually more expensive. And this stuff like lethal injection, go and research it, folks. It was developed by the Nazis. Personally, having met people who have gone to prison and knowing that the prisons don't do a lot to actually reform people, I do believe that if we're going to have the death penalty, you know, it should be reserved for the most serious of cases. I don't really agree with using Nazi tactics to murder people who are murderers. You know, I think life in prison is a pretty serious punishment. Being alone in a cell with your thoughts after doing some serious crimes, it's enough to drive a man crazy. So the last thing we're going to do in this video is talk about Joe Biden and his stance on law and order. Now, earlier you heard Trump say that Joe Biden won't even mention the words law and order because he'll lose his radical left supporters. Which is probably true. You know, he has a lot of Antifa types and Black Lives Matter types that support him that generally want things like defunding the police. But Joe Biden doesn't really support defunding the police. And if you go back and watch this video that I'm going to show you, in 1994, he's said some very racial things in support of this crime bill that he passed. And we're going to talk about how this has harmed communities of color And then we're also going to talk about the election before we wrap this video up. So check this clip out.
Unless we do something about that cadre of young people, tens of thousands of them, born out of wedlock, without parents, without supervision, without any structure, without any conscience developing, because they literally, I yield myself 3 more minutes, because they literally have not been socialized. They literally have not had an opportunity. We should focus on them now, not out of a liberal instinct for love, brother, and humanity, although I think that's a good instinct, but for simple pragmatic reasons. If we don't, they will, or a portion of them will, become the predators 15 years from now. And Madam President, we have predators on our streets that society has, in fact, in part because of its neglect, created. Again, it does not mean because we created them that we somehow forgive them or do not take them out of society to protect my family and yours from them. They are beyond the pale, many of those people. Beyond the pale. And it's a sad commentary on society. We have no choice but to take them out of society.
Mass incarceration has put hundreds of thousands behind bars for minor offenses. Joe Biden wrote those laws.
Every major crime bill that's come out of this Congress has had the name Joe Biden on that bill. We do everything but hang people for jaywalking in this bill.
Joe Biden's policies destroyed millions of black lives. Joe Biden may not remember, but we do.
So wow, there you go. You can see that he is definitely racially profiling certain people, calling them predators, being very divisive here. Pretty clear who he's talking about. Okay, saying that people aren't socialized, they don't have their fathers, this and that. And we all know what's happened with his son. I'm not even going to mention that because, again, the censors could be going off. Couple things about this crime bill. 2 things I want to point out. You can see that this doubled the federal prison population. It put out things like mandatory life sentences for third strike offenses, even non-violent crimes like possession of marijuana. So there's people right now doing life in prison because they had some marijuana in their pocket or in their car or whatever. And meanwhile, there's child rapists that are going free. I mean, this is the world we're living in, folks. And if you look into the private prisons, I mean, it's a real problem. Look at this chart. You can see, if you look across the bottom, you'll see the years. It goes every 2 years, starting with 1994 after the crime bill. And you can see it went from 1 million up until about 2008. It peaked to about 1,400,000. Okay? Then you can see it leveled off and started to drop a little bit by the end for the total prison population. And people are actively trying to distort this information, folks. For example, look at this chart. You can see in this instance, they've made the chart smaller and they put it in 20-year increments. So it looks as if the prison population went down after the crime bill because you're looking at 20 years on this tiny little curve here. But again, go back and look at the one before this and you'll see it was more like a slow, steady rise. Till about the time Obama became president, then you see it'll level off. I think from this evidence, folks, I mean, you could argue that Joe Biden is just as tough on crime as Donald Trump when it comes to throwing people in jail and things like that. I mean, he flat out said he didn't support defunding the police. But Donald Trump really has tried to establish himself as the law and order candidate. But here's what I want to ask you. Didn't all these monuments and stuff get vandalized under Donald Trump? Hasn't history been under attack the last 4 years? We're blaming everything on Democrats and stuff when Trump has been in office the whole time. I mean, I watched while he tweeted as statues and stuff were getting torn down. I mean, it's really embarrassing. So I think both of these guys are honestly laughable. The very last thing I want to talk about before I let you guys go is this document from the Committee on Oversight and Reform. This is from the House of Representatives. You can see that this is a letter addressed to the Honorable Emily Murphy of the General Services Administration, and it talks about some of these problems with the election. I'm not going to talk about it all because if you want to read it, you can go ahead and pause it. There's too many censors right now. Again, I'm not trying to get another channel taken down, but if you look at this second screen here, go ahead and pause it if you want to read the whole thing. Look at the second to last paragraph. You can see it says, according to congressional intent and past precedent set by President Clinton as of today, there is no apparent president-elect. So I'm not going to say much more than that. Again, it seems like if I talk too much about what's going on, that people will attack this channel as far as the censorship. There's just too many sheeple out there. You know, they want to keep them divided. They don't want us to come together, folks. I don't know why, for the life of me, that people cannot see that both sides are playing us. We're paying all these taxes and supporting this system that does all these things we disagree with. How hard would it be to just come together? I mean, every day I can just point out to you example after example after example of how all these different news outlets just keep us divided, and it's pointless. Please stop buying into this stuff. Start doing the research. You know, whether you support Donald Trump or Joe Biden, it's time to just come together, folks, because this country is clearly not even being run by the President of the United States. Okay? If you really study both of the parties, they just want the same things, and they keep us divided while they make themselves richer. It's not that hard to figure out. So please stay tuned with this channel. I'm going to be uploading a lot more content. My old YouTube channel, One Concerned American, had almost 4,000 subscribers, and it was monetized and deleted within a matter of 2 days after I worked for a whole year to build up my base. So I need all the help I can get right now, but I don't really care about the money. You know, if you help me, I will add you to my virtual library, and you'll have access to all the different books that I use to research this stuff. We can keep in touch. It'll be like an intelligence network. That's what I'm trying to build here. Trying to wake people up and show them what's going on. I don't buy any particular candidate or any particular political party. I'm into just exposing the lies, and that's what you're going to get on this channel. So if you like it, stay tuned. Please give this video a like and a subscription. God bless you and your families.